Infoblox, and more importantly, we're going to talk and go deep here, really about what's going on in the world of security, what's going on in post-pandemic, what CEOs need to think about, and of course, more importantly, where is security headed as we go deeper, and really what kind of technologies are going to get us there. So, how you doing? What's going on?
Good. How are you, Ray? Good to see you again.
I am going through a little Thanksgiving withdrawal. It was nice to, finally escape a little and see people, but I think that's kind of exciting. How's your Thanksgiving?
It was good, although I didn't see that many people, so I'm envious now. But at least I had a good time with my family. So.
Well, it's a good point, right? We had a Zoom session with our extended family. That was kind of fun. We got folks together, and it's been interesting, right? I mean, everybody now knows how to use Zoom. The pandemic has taught people video conferencing do's and don'ts, and we're getting together in ways that we normally haven't before. But infrastructure is massively strained, right? You think about the consumer side, then you think about the enterprise side. It's even harder between the cloud haves and the cloud have-nots. So what's going on? How do you see this playing out in the long run? Are we going to be here like all the way in? Are we going to be half stepped in? Like what's going to happen here?
I think it is interesting. It's been obviously tough for everyone over the last 9 months under this pandemic. But if we start with enterprises around the world, I think you've seen the challenge of companies that weren't digitally prepared during this whole pandemic. Case in point, small restaurants, right? When small restaurants didn't have a website where they couldn't order takeout services, they were immediately at a huge disadvantage to companies that did. And obviously, thank God, many of them were able to scale very quickly and offer that so that they could actually stay in business. Well, if you scale that up to large companies as well, if you weren't able to sell your products online, if you weren't able to engage with your partners online, if you didn't provide superior customer service online, you were immediately at a disadvantage as everyone effectively was staying at home, right? So that is true as well. That's what we call digital transformation. That's what you talk a lot about in all your various programs that you have and on your website and everywhere. If you take that inside the business and you look at what does that mean for how we engage as employees of a company, well, the same is true there. The companies that have a lot of old legacy applications that were stuck in an old legacy data center, all of a sudden, since their employees weren't at the office anymore, it was much harder to access those applications. Not impossible, but it required that you could log in from home, that you had VPN infrastructure, and many companies didn't have that scale to the level that they all of a sudden needed. Whereas companies that had already embarked on a digital transformation a long time ago and had embarked on a cloud-first kind of path, all of a sudden their applications are in the cloud and they can access those just as well from home as they can from the office as well. So we certainly saw within our customer base these, what I've sort of called the haves and the have-nots. And it's absolutely true that those that were have-nots were massively challenged. And there are lots of discussions and have been lots of discussions going on in boardrooms and executive teams of how come we weren't prepared for this.
Not how come we weren't prepared. You know it. I know it. They pushed it off, right? This was
right.
Not a priority. Moving to the cloud was like, yeah, it's a nice to have, right? People were like, oh, digital commerce? Well, I don't have to worry about this, right? And moreover, I mean, they didn't even think about the security requirements that they need to even scale up. I mean, we spent a lot of time just saying, oh, this is nice to have. Other people can go differentiate. We'll let those folks go first. And suddenly we went from nice to have to this is a requirement. Like, what are you hearing inside boardrooms today? What are people saying?
Well, it's very clear. I think most companies around the world, depending on industry and where in the world you are, have recognized for a long time that digital is really important. But as you said, there are a lot of priorities. And so I think now for those that already were advanced in their digital transformation and on their digital platform, the best of those have looked at this as an opportunity to take more market share when some of their competitors were caught a little flat-footed.
Oh, yeah,
and for those that weren't there, I think they had thought a lot about the things, and now they had to prioritize. And obviously, they had to prioritize, in some cases, getting their customers just online to buy stuff. In some cases, they had to prioritize their employees to be able to access applications from home. And I think they need to increasingly start thinking not just about plugging the holes, but what can this digital transformation, this digital platform, give them of new opportunities that maybe they didn't see in the past, a way to reach new audiences, some markets that maybe they couldn't in the past, right? There's a big difference. It's a lot easier to scale on a digital platform than on a non-digital platform. And so the best companies are trying to really take advantage of that digital platform that they've reached a certain level of maturity on.
Asper, that is super insightful, right? And I think the other point that you made that was so important here was the have-nots, right? The have-nots have got to catch up. What's being done to help them? Like CEOs of companies, like, are they adapting? Are they going to jump into this? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? And I think, you and I spend our entire career in the IT kind of segment and in our industry. And it's easy for us to sometimes forget, people like us in our jobs, to sometimes forget the shortage of IT professionals in the world today, yes. Whether it's in security that we'll talk more about, or just in IT in general. And so if you're executive at a mid-market manufacturing company somewhere, let's say in the mid-US, how do you access that talent that is needed in order to do the digital transformation? So I see a lot of them are reaching out and buying services and capabilities from professional services companies. They try to buy their applications and their infrastructure from MSPs, and that's probably wise, because trying to hire all of those people on your own to take on that digital transformation is very, very difficult, right? So I think that's smart for the have-nots to do, because that's a way to accelerate what would otherwise take a lot longer if you had to hire the people. I always try to tell people that it's really important to think about what you're trying to achieve in architectures and in layers. Like, if you are going to take on a lot of new SaaS applications, which is wise, think through how you expect your employees and sometimes your partners to access those applications. What does that mean to your networks, how you built those in the past? And once you restructure and re-architect those networks, your data centers become cloud data centers and so on, what does that mean to your security access patterns that you've had in the past? And so pausing a little bit and thinking through that and building a right foundation, I think it's important, right? It's kind of like if you're building a new house, you really got to make sure you get the architecture right first.
Architecture is predominant. Form follows function. Business need drives the architecture. Definitely important here. But you're also making a point here. Like, you don't move everything to the cloud. You believe it's also going to be hybrid for some time, based on our previous discussions. I'd elaborate a little bit on that as well, so people don't feel like, we got to move everything now to the cloud and make that fatal mistake as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of applications that are in your own data centers out there. For most companies, they have virtualized as much of that as they could. That's given them some, price advantage over an old node lock type of data center. At least they can balance their resources a little bit better. And frankly, sometimes it's not financially advantageous to move some of those applications into the cloud when you already have your investment in your data centers. So it's wise to keep some of those applications that maybe you developed on your own, that you don't have the resources or priorities right now to redevelop. Maybe they're not as strategic. It's wise to keep those in your data centers. And then, of course, that's what leads to this hybrid architecture. You are adapting SaaS applications, whether that's Salesforce for your CRM types of functions, or whether that's Oracle Fusion or NetSuite or SAP for sort of your financial applications or HR applications. But most large companies have their own unique, homegrown, purpose-built applications that they have in their data centers. And there's no reason why that can't work. That's what we mean by hybrid implementation. That could work just fine. You just need to have the right architecture and the right infrastructure components to think of your data center as being extended into the cloud rather than being replaced overnight by the cloud. And that's what companies like Infoblox have spent a lot of resources building a set of infrastructural network services and security services, in our case, that allow our customers to extend their data center with cloud-based services.
Before we talk about those first principles of getting back to cloud fundamentals, and you and I have been talking about the cloud since '99. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, this is like the slowest
Wasn't
adoption of
cloud
any enterprise
then,
tech.
but yes,
This is the slowest adoption of any disruptive tech I've ever seen. I mean, this is crazy, right? I mean, only 20% of workloads in there. But before we talk about that, I mean, I remember you telling me a story about in the middle of the pandemic, you guys moved 2,000 workers on a security solution in 2 days.
200,000.
Is that 2 days? Did I read that wrong?
200,000.
Oh, 200,000.
One of the largest.
I even read that even. Wow.
One of the largest consulting companies in the world.
You can't name them.
Used to fly people around the world, right, and be at customer sites, and had to think about what those access patterns would like. They have offices all over the world, and then, boom, overnight, everyone's working from home. Now, how does that change your architecture? How does that change? Think about your security tools. In the past, when all of our applications were in our own data centers, we used to build security tools that defended what we called the perimeter. So big old-fashioned firewalls from the Ciscos and Palo Alto networks of the world. And all of a sudden, that perimeter is getting blown up. There's still a data center. There's still some perimeter. But now I'm accessing the applications from anywhere, and those applications are in whatever data center around the world. The perimeter didn't really exist the same way anymore. So much the same for this large consulting company. All of a sudden, the architecture changes. So security paradigms change. Rather than protecting people from coming in to my data center, I need to think differently about the individual that is accessing applications everywhere. Things like identity becomes really important. That's why you hear things like two-factor authentication and all these new, what we call zero trust network access types of security architecture. That's what this large consulting company needed. So they needed a way to ensure that DNS was as protected as it could be. DNS is domain name services, as you know. That's kind of the phone book of the internet. That's how we access every website we are going to. That's how that gets connected to an IP address. And for this company, it wasn't an option to get every one of those workers to bring their laptops in to install client software or whatever. It had to be cloud native, cloud enabled, rolled out super quickly. And that's kind of what we were able to do with what we call BloxOne Threat Defense, which is a secure DNS server.
Well, it's really important, right? We're getting down to the node level here. I mean, that's to be able to enable that type of decentralization. You can't do it without the node. And that's actually a principle here in terms of what a cloud first, network looks like. Let's talk more about that, though. I think just for people to understand, like, what do they need to put in place, especially for the have-nots, and also for some of the early adopters who might not have a chance to get to this advanced level.
Yeah, there's two ways to think about it. One way is to think about, as this idea of having my own corporate data centers moves to becoming a hybrid where my own data centers are shrinking. Like, we've got a very large customer that has a mandate from the CEO to eliminate the remaining 3 data centers in 2 years' time. That means everything will be either in colos or primarily in public cloud. But for at least many years, for the very large companies, you will live in this hybrid mode. Well, if your own data centers are shrinking and you're putting more of your applications in Amazon or Azure, then you should be spending a lot less money with legacy networking companies like Cisco, because you're not buying as many switches and routers as you used to. Instead, you're spending some of that money with Amazon and with Azure, where you rent compute nodes and networking access kind of capabilities. So what a cloud-first network means is one that allows you to do that. to shrink your own data center, that means really you should be paying for your network services as you go along on demand, not by over provisioning network structures like it's been done for the past 2 decades. And then as you expand in the cloud, you need the kind of fundamental network services that can embrace both. So for example, at Infoblox, our solutions manage DNS records. That's really what you access. And we manage IP addresses because you need control over what IP addresses you have on your network. And you need that control regardless of whether it's on your corporate network or whether it's in Amazon. In Amazon, you don't control the IP addresses. They give you some IP addresses, but you still need the same visibility. So you need a set of services that allow you to embrace that hybrid architecture. That's one dimension. And then the second dimension is the way you interact with those tools has been changing dramatically over the last few years. Much like when it comes to applications, we moved from this world of managing an application, the world that you and I came from, Ray, when we worked together at Oracle, where you used purpose-built management interfaces, to much more of a programming style management framework, what we call DevOps today. Well, the same thing happens in security and in networking. We sometimes refer to that as DevNetSecOps. All of these things come together. And so that's why you see the popularization of tools like Ansible and Terraform and others, because that's about automating the kind of systems that you have. And so those are the two moves that we see. One is embrace solutions that allow you to manage a hybrid infrastructure, much more cloud native. And two, embrace tools that allow you to manage things from more of an automated interface than unique UIs for every tool that you have.
It's a great point, right? And we're getting DNS, DHCP, and IP address management in place. But at some point, it's out of control, right? So what about automation? What's being done to automate that process on, I guess, DevSecOps, AI DevSecOps? Still have no idea what to call this thing. DevOps with AI.
Yeah, that's the point, right? I mean, young people today that get hired in to manage all of this infrastructure, they don't use the kind of GUI tools that you and I maybe were experiencing in the past, right? It's too cumbersome, too hard to get trained in those solutions. And I just don't have the time to learn 15 different tools. I want one interface, and that's these script-based type of tools like Ansible and Terraform. Then I want all of the infrastructural components, whether it's in security or applications or networking or compute, to have a open, modern API set that I can consume so that I can write my own automation capabilities, right? I want, once I've provisioned my network and laid it down, then I need to lay down my networks or my security services on top of it. Once I've done that, then I can provision the applications. That's kind of a sequence of things. And I can't be logging into 10 different tools to do that. I'm going to write one script that I can scale in these platforms. That's this notion of automation.
Well, between the two of them, right? I've got provisioning on one end and orchestration on the other end, right? I mean, even that is a lot to manage. So being able to get that down is pretty hard, as you know. So,
and that's just provisioning the services initially. How do you secure and how do you ensure that they are always up and running? These automation capabilities are also critical for continued services.
Right.
You need systems that are fault tolerant, that are resilient, that can sort of repair themselves. We are really moving towards that kind of a network that self-detects and self-repairs, right? That's kind of the ultimate destination.
Might as well add Chef and Puppet to this mix as well.
Yeah,
we get them all.
That's right.
So, but yeah, I mean, we are definitely seeing that, and at least that area has gotten much more mature over time. But security in a hybrid and multi-cloud world isn't easy, right? I mean, it's not nice and neat. It's not like, the attack surfaces are huge, right? You definitely have, threat levels that are occurring. So what do you have to do? How do we get those sound architectural principles?
Well, you got to move from the perimeter-based kind of mentality of the past to more of it's the identity, as we talked about earlier, the identity of the user that's in focus. And that's what we as an industry call zero trust network access or zero trust security type of architectures. It's a different way of thinking about things. When you make that change architecturally and from a governance perspective, of course, you then have to think about, do I have the right tools? Do I have the right providers of that kind of a service? I probably don't need to spend as much money on big hunking iron Palo Alto firewalls of the past since my perimeter is shrinking. But I do need to buy new cloud native, cloud-based tools from the likes of Zscaler and from the likes of Infoblox that have invested in these types of tools that focus specifically on who is the user once he is validated using some single sign-on type of tools, then what type of applications is he or she trying to access, and should they be allowed to do that or not? That's zero trust access, and that's a different philosophy than the tools of the past where you had the McAfee's and Symantec's focusing on antivirus and all of that kind of stuff. That's still important, but it's only a small portion of that new security architecture. And I think the good news, Ray, as we talked about when we had the segment together, the good news here is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of work has been put into things like the NIST framework, NIST framework, and that is what things like SOC 2 verification and validation is based on. That's what FedRAMP certification is based on. So that's as good a place as anywhere else to start if you're not really sure how to tackle this new security challenge. The NIST framework is a great
point. It's a great point. NIST framework is a good standard. And then for those security geeks that are in the advanced world, we're talking going from least privileged access to micro-segmentation and beyond, if you want to take it even a little bit further.
That's right.
Those are things that are shifting as we move in this market. But I think that's a really important point. Get that NIST framework. But you also said to other folks, you need to ruthlessly prioritize. Prioritize what? Because there's so much to do. And if you don't do that, you're going to get totally submerged.
Yeah, look, I mean, the average CISO, Chief Information Security Officer out in the world today has way more tools than they can implement at any given point in time. So that's where something like a NIST framework can really help you. If you go through something like a SOC 2 certification, that will help clear up for you where your biggest exposures are today. Is it in governance? Is it in training? It turns out, as you well know, Ray, that the vast majority of compromised IT infrastructures actually get compromised from the inside. It's simple phishing emails that gets sent in, and it only takes one employee to get tricked by that and click on it, and now you're infected somehow. So it's really important that you educate your own staff on how they need to be very diligent in how they think about what emails they click on or not. Of course, you can buy tools like Proofpoint that help you with that. But even if you do that, the cyber terrorists are so sophisticated now that those kind of tools can't prevent everything. So education of your own team is like so critical to get right. And then, of course, you philosophically have to think about, am I trying to buy as many security tools as I can from one mega vendor? Or do I believe in specialization where I get the best from the different vendors and kind of fit it together? And companies differ on how they think about that philosophically.
Yeah, and if you're in the federal government or any other agency, NIST 853 is the way to actually validate those as well, and you get to run through a FISMA audit as well. But they're great places to start. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. They're already out there. Hundreds of, I'd say thousands of professionals can actually perform that audit. In some cases, those are getting automated as well, which will help you get into that environment. Okay, so we talked a little bit about next level network experiences out here. What can we expect going forward? Where do you see customers tying this back to, or what their expectations are, and how do we take them there?
Yeah, let's talk about next level networking. That's kind of our phrase at Infoblox for how we think about networking. You can think of it as the vision of Infoblox. So what do we mean by next level networking? The example
and for those and for those back there, you know something about networking, right? I mean, you spend enough time at Cisco to say you know the networking, you know where the flaws are, and you know where the holes are. So
I
give
do
people some context there as well.
And I'm actually a software engineer, so I kind of understand the software side and the networking side as well. And obviously, I have a lot of respect and admiration for Cisco as well. But here's the fact of the matter: I'm old enough to remember when you needed access to a compute node, you had to procure servers from the likes of Sun Microsystems or HP or Dell or whoever else it was. And it could take months before you had that server available to install the applications that you and I worked on, Ray. Today, thanks to the cloud providers like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and others, that's literally seconds. You simply just go to a website, you have a very simple interface, and you can procure and provision as many compute nodes.
It still amazes me. It takes seconds, right? I mean,
it takes seconds, and you can allocate all the storage you need to them, and it's really trivial. And so all these great startups that we see forming today, they never buy servers or big storage devices. They rent it all. So why is it
serverless?
Why is it that hasn't been possible with networking? Well, we think it should be. I will tell you there's no technological reason why it shouldn't be that way. And so when we say next level networking experience or next level security experience, that's the kind of experience that's equally simple to that we are working very hard to bring to our customers for networking and what we call foundational security services. There's no reason why it shouldn't be that simple.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, it should be simple, one touch, automated, self-correcting, self-diagnosing, automated in that sense, right? Self-aware.
Yep.
I mean,
and you remember, Ray, when we worked together on applications way back when, that's when we were just starting to see these modern web-based applications. And I remember our boss telling us, that was when Amazon was just a shopping site, right? I remember our boss telling us, who has the user manual for Amazon? The point being, there was none. So why should we have all this need for all these CCIEs? That's a fancy term for people that get a black belt in Cisco technologies. Why should we have the need for that? We simply shouldn't. These things should be intuitive, easy to use, automating as much as possible. That's next level network experience.
I mean, you got 60,000 CCIEs. Think about that. That's a crazy number. Right?
Yes.
I think that was the number. I'm just running it off the top of my head. It's some crazy number like that. But that's a lot of CCIEs that's a lot. That will be automated over time.
That's right.
So, okay. Well, let's wrap up a little. What are the parameters and technologies that are going to get us here to this next level experience that you're talking about? Next level networking experience. How would you get there?
So we are already providing these experiences for the kind of capabilities that we are providing at Infoblox, which again is foundational security, so DNS, DHCP, and IP address management, foundational networking solutions, I should say. And then on top of that, secure DNS as a foundational security capability. So that's already available today. We have the world's only cloud-native, cloud-managed DDI solution available completely off the web today. It complements and integrates with our market-leading traditional type of networking solution that we've been, sort of building and selling for the past 20 years. We are busy building additional capabilities on top of that. There are other services you can buy. If you think about a company like Zscaler, they have already cloudified, if you like, proxy servers, which used to be sort of where you had market leaders like Blue Coat Networks, now Symantec, and others like that. And so I think where companies need to start is to understand that these capabilities are real, and they should start embracing those capabilities. At a minimum, start educating your IT staff, pushing your IT and security staff, make them do proof of concepts, proof points to show what this new architecture that we've been talking about, zero trust access, zero trust security, what that would look like in a modern cloud native type of world. Because it's starting to get there, but you need to make sure you kind of embrace that And so that's what we are working with our customers. Our customers don't want to change everything overnight. They want a gradual way where they can extend their existing systems, get more experience with these cloud native, cloud managed systems, and then gradually move over there when they are ready, when the ROI is right for them. And I think that's the way to think about it.
So you're thinking any scale, any level of complexity, any type of infrastructure?
Absolutely. If anything, a well-built cloud native, cloud managed solution has huge scale advantages over anything you could have in your own data center. And that's because of this dynamic scale out way that we built these modern applications. We have restrictions that are inherent in the hardware that we have when we sell our traditional networking devices. We don't have that restriction in our Blox One platform, which is our modern SaaS-based solution. We can literally spawn tens of thousands of DNS servers all over the world in minutes.
Automatically. Wow.
Automatically. As demand is needed, that is what the system was designed to do. That's a huge advantage for a customer. Let's say you're a big enterprise and you've never had an office in Australia. Now you start up and you build an office in Australia and you have people that need access there. You can afford to build a data center there or to put a DNS server there yourself. You don't have IT people there. So luckily, we have all these what's called points of presence around the world that ensures that a service like DNS that's very, very latency intense, that gets spawned and provisioned in a place that's very near where your users are, regardless of where they used to be. That's a huge advantage with cloud native applications.
So the bottom line is, if you believe in serverless computing, then you should actually have next level networking.
That's right. Absolutely. You have to think that way. That's what the world looks like.
Wow. I think a lot of CISOs haven't thought through that. I think there's a lot of opportunity here and a lot of awareness. So this has been great. But before we jump in there, I just remind people there's some really interesting articles on the Constellation side. Liz Miller wrote something on DDI, what it is and what it isn't. There's also another report about DNS, the first principles of enterprise security. You can get that on the Infoblox website as well. And Jesper, always a pleasure talking to you.
Great talking to you, Ray.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.